Hello. I'm Nathan Lively from Sound Design Live, which you probably know already if you're watching this. But I don't do live streams that often, so let me just check and make sure this is all working. So if you can see me and you can see my screen and you can hear me, please type hello or yes into the chat. Hi, Mike. Hey, Coley. So I see you guys saying hey. I see hello. Gerald says yes. Okay. So I think that means this is all working. That's great. So this is just going to be a short live stream where I'm going to show you one really cool feature in Crosslight where you can actually remove reflections that you don't want to see in your measurement. And why might you want to do that? Well, especially when measuring subwoofers, sometimes we get reflections into our measurement and that can screw up our phase trace and that can make it really hard for us to do our alignments. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. So before we do that, let me just tell you that the reason that I'm practicing with this today and showing you some stuff about Crosslight is that 1 week from today, I'll be doing another workshop called Flexible Sound System Calibration with Crosslight. And it's all free and it will be live a week from now. And if you're on Facebook, it will be at this link, which I'll put into the chat right now. And if you are not on Facebook, it will be on YouTube. And I'll put that into the chat right now. So these should both be public links that anyone can access. And if you click on notification on, then your phone will just give you a little notification right before I go live in a week. I'm really looking forward to this. I've been wanting to do some kind of presentation, some kind of workshop about Crosslight for some time. I've been using it for a couple of years now, and I've been using it randomly in YouTube videos, but I've never done a specific training about it. And, you know, I still consider myself a new user when it comes to Crosslight. I'm still learning about it, but I have been using it in the field, and I thought it would be fun to just show you some demos of some fun ways that you can use Crosslight in your workflows because it can be really flexible. Okay, so that's the upcoming workshop, but what are we doing today? So as the title says here, we are going to remove a single offending reflection from a measurement. Why are we going to do that? So a few months ago, I was doing a show in this space, just a medium-sized ballroom, and I was using a Nexo sound system with some S1210s and RS18s. And I was using the RS18s in their cardioid configuration, so you have some directional control. But as you guys know, it is still quite difficult to get control of our subwoofers when we're indoors. No matter what we do, they are bound to bounce off of some walls. And so that's why we always want to try to use directional arrays when possible. And interestingly, you know, even then we can still have some things happen where we get reflections into our measurements. So I'm not sure exactly where I was measuring in this room when I took this specific measurement. I didn't write down the location, but it's possible that I was over near a wall, or, you know, the way I was angling the microphone, somehow I'm getting quite a bit of reflected energy into that measurement. And we can see that here in Crosslight in the impulse response. So the impulse response is here in the top window. And you can see at the beginning here, we just have starting at 0 seconds, time of flight from the speaker to the microphone, noise, 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 noise. And then boom, we see our first impulse here. And then there's a bunch of stuff happening after that. Now, anytime we're looking at stuff in an audio analyzer, we want to have some sort of comparison, right? So I don't want to just look at this and try to think, what should I do with this? But I'm going to move forward without a comparison, just to show you sort of how this could go wrong. So let me make this window a little bit smaller again. What we're seeing here is impulse response here on the top. And let me make this window bigger. Okay. So we're seeing impulse response here on the top, and then we're seeing your magnitude response here and magnitude response here. So I'm going to switch this window to looking at phase. Terrifying, right? What are we supposed to do with this? Well, what audio analyzers do to help us visualize this data is they have some kind of noise reduction techniques. So every modern audio analyzer offers some kind of windowing, multi-time records. There's all these interesting ways that audio analyzers and developers have come up to help us visualize this data. And so one of the interesting things you can do with Crosslight is you can do this noise reduction either at the time of capturing the data or afterwards, or maybe some other times in between. So you're sort of freed up to do this whenever you want. You could just capture a bunch of data really fast and then come back and clean it up later. And so that's what I've done here. My typical workflow in the field is that I just go out and capture a bunch of data so I don't have to worry about too much at that time. And then I come back and look at that data. So I'm looking at this data, I say, hey, this is really hard to read. So let me see if I can run Crosslight's noise reduction algorithm on this. So it opens this window and I go to vary time transform. So you have some different options here, which I'm not going to be covering today. I'm mainly going to be looking at just two. One is vary time transform and one is VTTR, which stands for vary time transfer reverse. If you have never seen these words, it doesn't really matter. Just know that this is a flavor of having multiple time records to get really high quality noise reduction without sacrificing frequency resolution. And what we see here is it seems at first like it's working, but what it's doing is it's doing the exact same thing. I'm going to zoom out here. It's doing the exact same thing that almost every modern audio analyzer does, which is it looks for a peak. And it looks for this peak because it thinks, well, that's where the height of the impulse response is. That's where the most energy is. And so that must be the direct sound. And then everything after that is a reflection. And that is typically what happens, right? The very first thing that happens is a direct sound. Everything after that is a reflection. And so if I hadn't had zoomed out, and let's go back to the way this was, because this has happened to me a lot of times. So if I had not had zoomed out, and I'm just looking at this, I might just be working quickly and might just say, oh yeah, it looks like it's working. It grabbed onto the peak. I see it's doing some noise reduction down here. Great. And then I just move forward. So let's say that I do that. So I click apply and close. And we don't see anything yet because it just duplicated that data. So I need to switch over and look at that data. And I say, okay, is that better? I'm not sure. Let me put the cursor on the peak and see what that looks like. Okay, yeah, the data's cleaner now. And so I might not even notice, and I might just move forward with this, not really knowing what's going on. How might I have known what's going on? Well, there's a couple of clues here. Number one, reflections are always late, right? So whether it's a floor bounce, or it's coming from a wall, or a ceiling, or something else, the reflections are always late. And so it's a clue to me that I see this thing happening up here, and yet I was locked on down here doing my noise cleanup, my noise reduction. So a really great thing to have to do this kind of investigation is some kind of comparison. So I started out at the beginning talking about how it's risky and dangerous to do this kind of work in the absolute without some kind of comparison. Where do I get a comparison? Well, if you guys have been watching my YouTube channel at all over the last few years, I've been talking about this a lot. So you can get it from manufacturers, you can download it from Tracebook, or you can go out and take your own measurements. And that's actually what I did for these. So I went to the sound company ahead of time before the show, and I took my own measurements so that I would have something to compare it to. and then I put them into subaligner. So I'm just going to show you in subaligner, if you just run an alignment on any speakers, but in this case, not any speakers, sorry. You run the alignment at any distance. These distance and total elements don't really matter if all you want to do is just download some data. So I've got my speakers selected here because all I want to do is download these measurements. So what I want is a measurement of an RS18 with this DSP preset, the cardioid preset 30 to 85 hertz. And when I go to that recommendation page, I'm not really paying attention to this because all I want to get to is this export window. And from this export window, I can download any of these RS18s. I go back into my audio analyzer and I import them. And now what I did here was I was dragging this around. So let's say that I want to investigate that other peak over there. And so I might put this on there and I say, okay, I can see how maybe this might look like a subwoofer. And let's shift this down a little bit. Yeah, I see how this goes up like this. Yeah, this does look like a subwoofer, but this does look like an RS18, but this little wobble is kind of confusing. And also, shouldn't the direct energy be up here at the beginning? So I say, you know what? Maybe it's a mistake to just pick the highest peak here, because it's possible that the reflection is more energetic than the direct energy in some cases. So I'm going to take my reference guy here that I downloaded from Subliner, and I'm trying to get him in line with this noisy original measurement. And let me take off this offset. And I'm saying, you know what? This actually this makes a lot more sense to me now. So if I drag this to get it sort of perfectly on top of there, I see, oh, okay, yeah, maybe not here where we have more noise, but maybe this is the direct sound. So what can we do about this? How can I clean this up to get my original room measurement to look more like this measurement, this nice clean measurement that I downloaded from Subliner? And I'm going to zoom in a little bit down here to this phase graph, because this is really hard to read. I want it to look more like this blue guy. Okay, so I'm going to right click on here and go to noise reduction. And I'm in the wrong channel. So I go back to my red channel and I go to noise reduction. And this is the one that I just did, the bad one, so I should probably delete that. But I go back to VTTR transform and I remember what it's going to do. It's going to select this peak, which is the wrong one. So I already figured out this is probably a reflection. But what I can do now is I could manually move this over here to be on top of this peak and use that for the VTTR transform. But instead, what I'm going to do is select VTTR, which is VTTR transform reversed. And what you see there is how it magically removes this peak here. So here in red is the original. And now here in blue is what we have minus this little peak here. And I can even, adjust the size of this a little bit. So if I wanted to remove more, I would turn this number up. And if I wanted to remove less, I would turn this number down. And so I'm going to leave it on pretty much the default settings here, because all I really need to do is get rid of this peak so that the next time I run this, it will grab the correct peak. Okay, so I'm going to apply this. And remember, we don't see anything here because I need to switch over to it. And I grab this and I see, look at that. So the impulse response is cleaner already. I like that. The phase graph is cleaner already. That's good, but it seems like we could do even better. So I'll go back into noise reduction. Now I'm going to do noise reduction on this guy. Remember, we remove this peak here, remove this extra reflection energy. So now Crosslight, it's picking the correct peak. And I can know that, again, just by zooming out a little bit here. I see that there's no more energy here. And if I wanted to, I could also just take a look over here and see exactly where I had figured this out. Oh, it's about 100 milliseconds. This is about 100 milliseconds. Okay, great. I'm doing this correctly. And I'm taking you all through this step by step because my assumption is that you probably haven't seen something like this before, or you haven't seen Crosslight before. But of course, doing this in the field, it all goes really quickly. I'm just sort of being really verbose and clear about this, right? Okay, so we can see here in blue, I have a much cleaner impulse response. I'm looking down here at this blue guy. The red guy's is old, blue is new, and this light blue color is the coherence. And so now I might want to make a couple of small manual changes here. So I might want to adjust where the processing begins here, and there's a low pass filter I could add here. And I say, great, I like the way this looks, everything's cleaner now, so I'm going to apply and close, duplicate data, and now when we go to look at that, we see, okay, this is much easier to read than where we started. Okay, we started there, we removed that one reflection, and then we applied noise reduction to the entire signal. And now, except for this one little wobble here, we can kind of read through the entire operating range here of the subwoofer. And just want to point out this little wobble here. You know, this is why even with these powerful tools that we have like noise reduction and Crosslight, I still always want to have some sort of comparison here, because without this, you know, I either might not have time to, or I might not be able to remove whatever this last thing is so I can read all the way through here. And so it's really nice to have a comparison to say, hey, this is what's really happening here. Right here where we see a drop in coherence, we see this dip in the magnitude response, we see this wobble in the phase trace, like all these things are connected. And so I know to sort of ignore this thing that's happening through here in the red trace. So that is VTT and VTTR and Crosslight. That's how you can easily remove a reflection from your measurement to get more actionable data, or you could do investigation on just the reflection. That's another interesting thing you could do. And I just want to see if there's any questions. So if you have any questions about this technique or about the upcoming workshop, you can put those into the chat right now, and I'll check those in a second. So I'll just remind you that if you're interested in the workshop, it's coming up on November, and I think I have a little text thing here. And go. There we go. So November 15th, that's when the workshop's coming up. There'll be a link in this video somewhere or in the chat, and I hope you'll join me. Yes, it will be recorded. That's everyone's first question, right? It'll be recorded. I'll be doing a bunch of fun demos, and just to give you a preview, we'll be doing some interesting things like main sub-alignment. I'm going to show you how you can take a bunch of measurements really fast, and I'm going to see if I can get a remote control car to do it with. Okay, so let me move this, and then I'll just see if there's any questions before we go. Okay, so Foam Heads says that there's a delay in the broadcast. So I might hang out just for a little bit and see if I'm waiting for people to type and stuff like that. Let's see, Mike is saying, I used Rita and love it. That's great. Yeah, and I should point out, this will just be good practice for me for a week from now, that I'm doing this workshop about Crosslight, not to say that Crosslight is the best audio analyzer or that you should use Crosslight. I'm doing this workshop about Crosslight to kind of open up your ideas, your eyes to maybe some possibilities you didn't know about. There are some interesting options you have with workflow using different audio analyzers that you should probably just know about. That way, if it seems like, and a workflow that would work for you, you know about it as a tool that you have in your toolbox. And that's what we care about as sound engineers, right? We just want to get the job done. We want to know the best, fastest way to do it, and a way that works for us, where we can really hear the results and we can maybe see them and measure them and just get the job done. So that's what it will be all about. Okay. So Foamhead is saying, watch it on YouTube and that will get rid of the delay. Okay. Well, it doesn't look like there are any questions. I'll check this video again later to see if anybody posted anything. But this was fun for me and a good test, of the streaming platform so that I can make sure that this all works. And hope to see you guys in a week. So thanks for hanging out with me here today.